Hello everyone. Tonight we step into a period darker than the frost of the north, where women have no names, no rights, and sometimes no identity at all. We'll follow a Viking girl who was kidnapped, sold into slavery, then survived and rose, not with a sword, but with a will that could burn an entire village to the ground. Forget the image of a majestic blonde warrior woman on the screen. The truth is, if you were a woman in the Viking age, simply surviving was an extraordinary feat. Before you lean back comfortably, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to the channel, but only if you genuinely enjoy the content I share, and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. It's fascinating to see people following from all over the world. Now, turn off the lights, maybe turn on a fan for some background noise, and let's embark on tonight's journey together. Imagine you arrive in the Viking age, where epics describe braided warriors charging into smoke and fire with axes in hand and eyes blazing like the heavens. But if you're a woman, don't expect triumphant background music or well-fitted armor. No slow motion, no sunset, piercing through a shield, just mud, blood, fish grease, and a string of days no one sings about. You're born amid the howling wind from the North Sea, and your mother's hoarse screams. She's clenching her teeth on a straw bed lined with reindeer hide, in a hut roofed with damp, mossy grass. The midwife smears ash on your forehead, not to bless you, but to keep you warm, because your tiny body is trembling like a fish just pulled from a net. No one cheers, no name is drawn from mythology. Your father glances at you, then goes back to carving an oar. You're the fourth child, and the third daughter. That means, in order of priority, you rank below the boat, the goats, the salt stash, and maybe even the unfinished leather tunic. But you don't know that. You just cry. And that cry rings out like a horn, signaling the start of a journey you didn't choose. The first smell you breathe isn't your mother's milk, but the smoke of burning moss, mixed with dried manure, and the salt that corrodes wood. You're wrapped in rabbit hide, and tucked beside the hearth. Not because anyone loves you, but because it'd be a waste if you froze to death. A few days later, you're placed at your mother's breast, but she doesn't sing lullabies. She's counting the turnips left in the cellar, and wondering if this year they'll have to eat porridge mixed with ash again. That's when you officially become part of the Viking cycle. Not mythology, but the grind of survival, where women are born to hold whetstones, cook broth, and if they're lucky, survive to puberty. And if they're unlucky, well, at least you'll be buried with the iron pot your grandmother passed down. Ready? Because this isn't a story about a Hollywood warrior woman. This is your story, and it begins with blood, mud, and a lullaby, swallowed silent. Time passes. You don't remember the first time you stood steady on your feet, but you vividly recall the first time you slipped and fell into goat dung. That's when you were allowed to leave the hearth's corner, crawl out from under the damp animal hides, and start helping around the house. A pretty phrase that, in Viking times, meant learn to live without complaining. You're barely 3, but already plucking feathers with bare hands, twisting dry grass into rope, and turning dried fish on the rack. The smell of fish? No, the smell of fish, grease mixed with sweat and moldy moss. It seeps into your hair, your clothes, and never leaves. You learn to wash dishes with ash, clean bloodstains with urine, and keep your hands from freezing by tucking them into a leather pouch hung near the fire. A pouch that also holds fallen nails, milk teeth, and a few things you can't identify. While boys your age learn to throw axes, climb trees, and shout in the snow, you learn to braid hair without trembling hands, carry a bucket of water heavier than yourself without spilling, and pretend not to hear your parents' arguments on winter nights. You don't have dolls. You have a chicken bone carved round to be your baby. It doesn't cry, neither do you. Sometimes you peek through a door crack and see your brothers playing warrior in the yard, pretending to be Thor, swinging wooden axes, calling each other Lord of the Isles. Meanwhile, you're hunched over, sewing your father's 5th patch tunic with a broken bone needle and thread made from old sheep sinew. You're taught that a good woman is silent, skilled, and cold resistant. Cry from pain, fine. Cry from sadness, forbidden, because no one has time for your sorrow. The winter you turn 7, your older sister catches a fever. She shivers, coughs like a taut rope snapping, and that night, she doesn't wake up. No funeral is held. She's wrapped in bear hide, buried behind the goat pen. Your mother wipes her hands on her apron and tells you, keep cutting onions, don't let the fire die, and you do, not out of obedience, but because no one else will if you stop. You start learning to tell time by the sun, predict rain by the clouds, and gauge whether you'll get hit that day by your father's eyes. In summer, you follow your mother to the river, washing clothes with bare hands in water, so cold it numbs your teeth. The cracks in your skin don't heal, they just harden. You learn to dry clothes fastest before rain hits, and to hide the last clean cloth for your first moon days, which you dread like a demon. No one explains it, you're left to experience it alone. One morning, at 9, you wake to blood trickling between your legs. You think you're dying. You don't scream, you just sit there, watching blood seep into the straw, while the kitchen still smells of burnt porridge. Your mother sees, says nothing, just hands you an old rag. That's it. No welcome, no hug, no comfort.
You understand?
From now on, you're officially part of the adult world. The next day, you're sent to the fields, to dig soil, to pick barley grains by hand, to stand in sun, rain, snow, and not collapse. A Viking girl isn't allowed to be weak, not for feminism, but because the weak are left behind. And you, though you've only learned to count to 20, know this better than anyone. Your lunch is cold porridge in a wooden scoop, eaten standing among chickens, goats, and the laughter of boys swinging real axes at logs. You aren't taught to hold an axe, but you learn by watching, silently, memorizing, not to fight battles, but to survive. In a world where being born a woman means always standing one step behind and being called tradable property. But you don't fully grasp that yet. You just know the smell of fish grease still clings to your hair, and goat dung sticks to your hem forever. Your childhood has no wild flowers, no fairy tales.
Just fire.
Wind, cold stones, and dreams too short to see their end. But you don't fall, because no one taught you to fall. And so you keep walking, with scratched feet, a hardened heart, and a gaze that's never known surrender. But no matter how strong you are, one thing never relents, never shows mercy, and never vanishes. The cold. The cold needs no weapon. It doesn't shout, doesn't strike, doesn't draw blood. It just seeps into your skin, creeps up your sleeves, and steals breath from your chest like a thief robbing life every night. You don't clearly recall the first winter you thought you'd die. Maybe it was the year you turned 10, when the floor froze solid, and your mother placed a hot stone under your bed to stop your convulsions in sleep. But that warmth faded in less than an hour. The cold didn't. It bites your knuckles when you carry a copper pot to the well for water. It makes your feet bleed just from stepping on frozen ground, and it teaches you. Surviving this land isn't about weapons, but about endurance. You don't have fur coats like nobles. You have 3 thin wool layers, 1 old hide, and straw boots with rotted heels from last season. The north wind cuts through every seam like invisible fingers, exposing your weakness. You don't have fur blankets. You sleep against the wall, back to stone, hands clutching a heated brick, feet trapping a small cat for warmth. Morning comes, the hearth is dead, your hair is iced, your eyebrows frosted white, and your mother shouts, "Get up, no water, no ashes swept, no chickens slaughtered." No one asks if you're cold, because everyone is, only the weak say it aloud. You learn to press hot stones to your wrists to speed blood flow. You learn to breathe through a cloth to avoid frozen lungs, and you learn to rub seal fat on your elbows to prevent cracking. No one teaches these things. You observe, you try, you hurt, then you remember. You also remember the first time you saw someone frozen dead in a sitting pose. It was the old woman next door, dozing off while peeling turnips. Next morning, she was still there, eyes wide, hands stiff. No one cried. They wrapped her in sackcloth, carried her to the hill, and buried her.
You were scared.
But then you got used to it, because if you didn't, you'd end up like her. That's when you realized the cold doesn't just kill the body, it erodes the will, and you, though small, vowed not to let it win. The coldest nights are when the wind howls through the roof, like the wail of death gods. You lie curled up, hearing wood creak, hearing your parents whisper about goats frozen dead, moldy grain, the eldest son not back from the distant fjord. You stay silent, eyes wide, learning to gauge wind by sound, measure snowfall direction by the fire's flicker on the ceiling. These things aren't taught in books, but they're carved into your bones like cracks from frost. The cold also teaches you Viking justice. If you're female, it doesn't spare you sooner. but it forces you to learn faster. Boys might sleep in warm sheep pens. Girls are tasked with tending the hearth, clearing ashes, cleaning chimneys, the coldest, most dangerous places. So you learn to endure as if it's in your blood. You learn to split wood with wrist strength. You know which moss burns warmer. You know when the hearth has one breath left before dying, and you learn to blow it back to life. You survive your first long winter, then the second, then the third. Each year you grow a bit taller, a bit thinner, and a bit colder in the eyes. Not because you weaken, but because you understand those who survive winter don't become human. They become something harder than human. Maybe stone, maybe iron, maybe ice, but definitely not a child anymore. One day your mother hands you a new cloth, not to wear, but to sew diapers for the newborn. You're the eldest now, she says, and you look at your sibling, red, frail, trembling. You hold them close, shielding them with your body, and for the first time in your life, you realize the cold isn't the scariest enemy anymore. It's just the first test you've passed, and from now on you'll teach others to survive, the way you taught yourself. But to teach anyone, you must first survive a new challenge, labor. Not the kind where you chip at stone and go home to tell tales, but labor that makes every vertebra creak, snaps your nails, leaves your hips aching from before sunrise to when the moon peeks over the snow ridges. At 11, your breasts haven't grown, but your hands are plowing earth. Not with oxen, with you. One pulls, one pushes, one clears stones, and you're in the stone clearing group. Stones twice your weight, cold as your father's refusal, when you begged to rest one morning because of stomach pain. You're a girl and still complaining. Who'll hold this land then? He said. You didn't answer, because you were trying not to cry. Winter tears freeze before they hit your cheeks. Each day begins with shouts, ends with groans. Your hands swell, your shoulders bruise, your knees scrape raw. You don't get gloves. Goat hide is for adults. You wrap old rags around your palms, then drape them over your shoulder when they're soaked with blood. Lunch is barley bread, hard as stone, dipped in thrice-boiled vegetable broth. You don't sit to eat. You stand back to the wind, to trap warmth in your chest. Your breasts ache daily, not from growth, but from bruises, from being crushed against water buckets, wooden crates, hoe handles. Your body changes, but no one notices. To everyone, you're not a young woman. You're the beardless boy, a tool that cooks, milks, and doesn't talk back. Your dreams don't have princes, white dresses, just a roof that doesn't leak, a morning that's not cold, a day without blisters. But that day doesn't come. The spring you turn 12. The soil's barely thawed when the order comes. Dig pits for onions. You wield a shovel taller than you. Pass out on the third dig. When you wake, you're beside a straw pile, mouth full of blood and wet earth. No one carries you. They just left you there, waiting for you to wake and dig again. And you do. Not because you're weak, but because if you don't, there's no supper. That's when you realize in this world, you have no right to rest. No one measures your strength by age, gender, feelings. They just ask, can you do the work? If the answer's no, you're left behind. And you're not about to be left behind. You learn to grip the hoe with your arms, not your back. You learn to breathe deep before lifting stones. You learn to pivot on your heels, clench teeth instead of cry out. And you survive. On nights too tired to comb your hair, you lie still, staring at the pitch-black ceiling, hearing spring insects crawl under the roof. And you tell yourself, still alive. Tomorrow, more digging, still alive. Maybe that's not what a girl your age should think. But here, no one cares about should. One day, your mother gives you a cloth. Not for a dress, but for a work shirt. You're not a kid anymore, she says. You look at your hands, calloused, bruised, cut-scarred. Your labor now, a link in the survival chain that, if broken, starves the family. And you're proud, a little, because no one says thank you, but no one dares call you weak anymore. You start getting adult tasks, baking barley bread, tending the hearth, measuring malt water for brewing. You learn to tell raw from sprouting grain by smell. You learn to tell time by sunlight, on the water trough's edge. You learn to gauge the hearth's warmth, to know when to pull bread out, These skills aren't taught, but you master them like you were born knowing. One morning, a stranger visits the village, a merchant from the harbor. He looks at you, says, "That girl's quick-handed. She'd do well on a ship." Your father shakes his head. "She's a girl. She's not going anywhere." You stay silent. But for the first time in your life, you see a door that was once shut crack open, and you start thinking, what if, by working hard enough, heavy enough, long enough, you could be chosen, not just to live, but to go. For now though, a few more onion pits need digging. Because if you don't dig, who will? That question hangs in every breath you take, and it's also the answer to why, from age 13 on, you become a full-time laborer. No paycheck, no holidays, no one asking if you want to. You're no longer that little girl. Now you're the quick hand, the one good at kindling, the kid who milks without spilling. A name's unnecessary as long as you get the job done. Your day starts before the roosters crow, while others huddle in straw blankets. You're in the cowshed, milking in the dark, hands stiff as iron bones. Your morning smell is fresh manure, hot milk, and smoldering smoke from last night. Then you kindle the hearth, blowing fire through a reed pipe. If the wind's damp, it takes half an hour to spark a flame. You can't fail. No one drinks cold tea. No one forgives a breakfast without porridge. By dawn, you've cooked 2 big pots, one for people, one for livestock. No rice. You use old oats, half-raw mashed potatoes, and bones reboiled from yesterday. No one complains. They eat, then leave. You don't. After breakfast, you wash dishes, with sand, hearth ash, and cold water. Your hands are greasy, skin peeling in patches. Before you can sit, your mother calls, "Take the laundry to the river. Hurry while there's sun." So you haul a basket twice your size, walk over half a mile to the riverbank, and spend the morning knee-deep in water, so cold your toes turn purple. You scrub clothes by hand, wring them with your knees, and learn to hide tears in your breath. Your back aches, shoulders throb, wrists give out, but you must return in time to pound barley for supper. On the way back, if you pass village boys, you lower your head and walk fast, not from fear, but because you don't have time to be teased. A tongue click, a whistle could cost you 2 minutes, and 2 minutes is enough to burn the bread baking in ashes. Afternoons you scrape goat hides, sew bags, patch trousers, pick weed seeds from raw wool. No steel needles, just fishbone. You stab 10 times, cut your hand 3. No one sees. You lick the blood, wrap a rag, keep going. As the sun fades, you gather firewood, boil water, chop greens. No pressure cookers. Every dish is a negotiation between time, fire, and patience. Too long it burns, too quick, it's raw. And you're always hungry, because women eat last. After men, after children, after hunting dogs, if they're trained. Your bowl is the pot's burnt bottom, colorless broth, bone scraps. No one bothers to gnaw. You eat fast, then clean, then scrub pots again, then check the hearth, then patch another hole in your sibling's tunic. At night, when everyone snores, you curl up in a corner, hands still aching, eyes stinging from smoke. No pillow. You rest your head on a grass bundle. No blanket. You wrap a tattered coat and hug your stomach for warmth. And though your eyes close, your mind calculates what to cook tomorrow, how much firewood's left. If the chicken losing feathers is sick, sleep is a luxury. Lying down is a blessing. Dreaming? Dreams are a delicacy for those who aren't you. You're a full-time laborer. No contract, no praise, and absolutely no tiredness allowed. One day, you oversleep from a fever. When you wake, the hearth's cold, the pot's not boiling, and your mother looks at you like you've betrayed the bloodline. There's no such thing as sick, only lazy, she says. You don't argue. You stand, hands shaking, eyes blurred, and you kindle the fire. Not because anyone forced you, but because you know if you don't, no one else will. You're not a princess, not a peasant, not a warrior woman. You're all of those, combined, but nameless. Just a role, a duty, and blood under your nails. Somewhere in this world, maybe, girls your age are laughing, learning songs, being taught about love. You learn to slit a chicken's throat without it squawking, to stack wood for an even burn, to bathe in a cold water barrel without shivering, to avoid scolding. And at night, you teach yourself the most important lesson. Tomorrow, it all starts again, and you must be the first to wake and face it. Because if not, then who? That question doesn't just follow you on frost-cracked mornings, silent meals, or nights sewing by flickering firelight. It follows you to the day your father sits down, doesn't look at you, and bluntly says, "You'll marry Olaf." You're stacking firewood. Your hands freeze mid-motion. The statement comes with no explanation. No "what do you think?" No "do you agree?" No "do you even know who Olaf is?" But you know, Olaf, son of Gorm, the man with the village's biggest cattle herd, half his teeth, and a hand always gripping a whip. You've seen him herd goats by kicking their bellies, and now he'll be your husband. The wedding has no ring, just a goat, a jug of malt ale, a new cloth as dowry. Your mother ties your hair with hemp cord, gives one instruction: don't shame the husband's house. And you don't cry, not from strength, but because tears dried up after years of cold, scolding, silence. The night before the wedding, you're not allowed to sleep indoors. You lie in the back shed, to cleanse old energy. No pillow, no blanket, just the smell of old manure and restless pigs. And you lie there, eyes wide, wondering if this is a Viking woman's fate. Why are the gods silent? The next morning, you're dressed in a new tunic, heavier than you, adorned with shells and fish bones. They say it symbolizes fertile wealth. You walk step by step to Gorm's house, under the village's gaze. No one smiles, no one sings. This isn't a wedding, it's a handover. The wedding night has no flowers, just the smell of sweat, ale, and heavy breathing. You lie still as taught. Don't cry out, don't flinch, don't weep. Afterward you clean the bed. No caresses, no whispers, no "are you okay?" Just snoring. And you, sitting, wiping blood with the white cloth your mother gave, with her words, "Wash it clean. First blood is sacred." You didn't marry for love. You married because your father owed cattle, because your mother wanted one less mouth to feed, because Olaf needed someone to bake, sew, bear children, and stay silent. You become a wife. But that title's no different from the one you've carried all your life. The one who endures. The next morning, you wake before the roosters, kindle the hearth, boil water, cook porridge for the husband's house. Olaf sleeps on. Gorm mutters, "Can this girl cook anything but ash?" You smile faintly, bite your lip, swallow, not porridge, but humiliation. The first months, you live like a shadow in the new house. No one calls your name. You're his wife. When guests come, you don't eat at the table. During feasts, you stand behind the kitchen. And when cramps hit during your moon days, you work as usual. No one cares. No one asks. You keep living, keep working, keep silent. But something else is quietly growing inside you. Not love, but fire. Not the warming kind, but the kind smoldering in a hearth, waiting to blaze when the ashes are dry enough. One time, Olaf, drunk, comes home late, throws a bowl of soup to the floor, because it's not salty enough. You look at the shards cutting your foot, blood seeping, and for the first time, you don't feel pain, just cold. Cold as the night you were forced to wed. Cold as the night you lay with pigs. And you think, what's love? A sickness, a luxury, or something they made up to keep women in place. You don't need love. You need to survive. You need to wake each morning without being struck. You need one day to drink warm water before work, and you know no one will give you that. You must take it yourself. From then on, you change, quieter, sharper. You learn to count Olaf's sips of ale each night, to know when he'll pass out. You learn to thread a needle in the dark, preparing thick clothes in case you must flee midwinter. You hide grain seeds under the kitchen floor. You learn to collect beeswax from wall cracks, dry rabbit hides, stockpile sheep fat. No one notices. Why would they care about a wife who cooks porridge? But they don't know. You're no longer the girl they married off. You're someone waiting for the right wind to fan the flames. And if you're lucky, you won't wait long, because the wind season's coming. And this time, you'll decide who you belong to. Not for love, but because you're done living, like you have no choice. And then one day, the choice arrives, not as freedom, but as your husband's cold corpse. Olaf dies, not in battle, not at sea, not in bed with a sword in hand, but from slipping into a manure pit behind the cow shed on a drunken night, broken neck, dead on the spot. They call it an accident. You say nothing, just grab a bucket of hot water, wash the mud from your feet, and step into the house like it just rained. No tears, no smile, no bowed head, Olaf is buried in the village graveyard, under stones and a few mumbled prayers from his senile father and men who barely recall his name. You stand 3 steps back, hands behind you, eyes straight ahead. The wind that day is bitter, but you don't shiver. Not from thick clothes, but because the cold inside you has long turned to stone. You become a widow at 19. No children, no property, no kin by your side, but you have something you never had before. Space, an empty house, a hearth no one claims, a patch of land free of shouts. And in that space, you start to breathe, really breathe. Not the kind where you inhale to endure, but the kind where your lungs finally find their own place. Everyone expects you to collapse, to weep, to run back to your mother's house, clutching your chest, begging for protection. But you do nothing. You just keep kindling the hearth, fetching water, tending the fire, and at night, you sit alone, sipping watery ale, left in a jug, watching the flames, thinking, "This is my house. I'm the only one here." No one shouts, no one forbids, no one commands. People start whispering you're strange, that you have witch's eyes, that you shouldn't smile so early in the morning. You don't care. You know they fear what they can't control. And a young woman living alone without breaking. That's terrifying. Gradually, village men come knocking, not to check on you, but to propose. A young widow, childless, with land, a house. Prime as a feast day loaf. They bring ale, meat, sweet words. But you just smile, invite them in, pour warm water, and don't offer a seat. "I won't marry again," you say. "I'm wed to freedom." Some laugh, some rage, some mutter, "Ungrateful woman," but others back away, because your eyes aren't a girl's anymore. They're the eyes of someone who's seen death and didn't flinch. You start running your small plot, like a true farmer. You hire 2 orphaned village kids to help, paying with food and shelter. You sow for wealthy homes, sell herbs to neighbors. You learn to haggle prices, to scold when needed, to refuse without bowing. You don't need protection. You set the terms. By autumn, yours is the only house, with enough stored grain. The ones who laughed, now knock. You share, a little, on condition. Work. No work. Nothing. They start calling you, the young mistress. You don't object, because for the first time, the title doesn't come with a man's shadow behind it. You sleep better, eat fuller, laugh louder, and at the market, you walk slower, head high, like the path's finally a bit smoother. But you don't forget. Not the first night as a wife, not the sound of breaking bowls, not the smell of blood on white cloth. And so you teach the orphaned kids to hold a knife, to hear strange footsteps at night, to douse a fire without leaving smoke, not from paranoia, but because freedom needs guarding. And you've learned, the hardest way, that freedom doesn't stay once it arrives. It needs watching, vigilance, and sometimes claws. One winter day, a young woman knocks at your door, clutching a bruise, eyes blackened. Her husband, a guard, beats and curses her. She has nowhere else to go. You look at her and see yourself. Without a word, you open the door, share your meal, share your bed, share your silence. That night, you write in charcoal on the wall, "This is the place for women still alive." And from then on, Olaf's old house, once your tomb, becomes a refuge, a fortress without walls, but with fire. And you, a 19-year-old widow, learning to turn loss into a weapon. But a weapon is only strong when you're the one wielding it. When you're dragged from your own doorstep, hands bound behind your back, head hooded, feet kicking helplessly against frozen ground, the only thing you have left is your breath. And you hold onto that breath, shallow and broken, because you know a survivor is someone who doesn't let themselves die easily. They came at dawn, when mist still cloaked the earth, before the roosters could crow. They didn't knock. They didn't shout. They swept in like darkness, swift, precise, ruthless. They struck the 2 orphaned children with axe handles, ransacked chests, kicked over the hearth, then grabbed you like a flailing chicken. You had no time to grab a knife, no time to scream, no time to see their faces, only time to hear a whisper among their rough footsteps. The widow with land, she's worth something. You're shoved onto a wooden cart. The wheels roll over stones, sounding like bones clashing. You're in a nightgown, blood oozing from your chin, where they slapped you to shut you up. Wind cuts through the tear in your back, making you shudder, but you don't tremble, not because you're fearless, but because fear changes nothing. And in your mind, memories align like chess pieces awaiting a move. Olaf's drunken voice, your father's eyes when he gave you away, your mother's wedding blessing, the crack of bricks as you cleaned the hearth, all return, not to comfort, but to remind, you've survived worse. When the cart stops, it's dark, you're yanked out like a sack. A camp, not a village, no flags, no gods, just campfires, the smell of burnt meat, and drunken men. They lock you in a hide tent with 2 other women, a girl barely past puberty, and an old woman with clouded eyes. No one speaks, you just look at each other, cracked lips, bruised eyes. Silence is the language of those stripped of humanity. Through the tent's slit, you hear men laughing, boasting of dividing spoils, killing, trading people for dried fish, blood for gold. You understand you're no longer the widow, you're merchandise, a priced item, and your value rises if you're obedient, but you have no intention of obeying. The first night, you don't sleep, you listen. Remember, every voice, every footstep, every clank of dragging chains. You have no knife, but you have memory. And memory, if sharp enough, can slit a throat. The second night, you speak to the old woman, with eyes, with hands, with breaths. She was a healer, taken from a coastal village. The girl, a chieftain's daughter, now a slave. All 3 of you are nameless, but all have reasons not to die, and that's the starting point. You're not a warrior, you've never held a shield, never gone to battle, but you know how to hide a sharp object in your sleeve, how to feign weakness to be let out early, how to breathe evenly, to hide a racing heart. You wait, watch. One night, when the guards are dead drunk, you pretend to faint. 2 men drag you out, planning to share you before the sale. You don't scream, don't struggle, you smile. Then, with a bone shard hidden in your hair, snapped from a tent chair, you stab the first man's eye. The second doesn't get to yell before the old woman hurls a stone at his neck. The girl grabs the keys. The 3 of you run. Not run. Crawl, slither, slide through mud, straw piles, animal carcasses, dying fires. You don't know where you're going. You just go, north to the forest. Cold, wet, but sparsely populated. That night, you hide in a tree hollow. The smell of blood, urine from fear, moldy moss. But you're alive, and you know this time, you're not just a captive. You're becoming a warrior. Not with a sword, but in the sense that no one will dare call you talking meat again. The next morning, you rise before the forest birds. You gather stones, snap branches, break thorns. No words, but your eyes hold fire. And in your heart, an unspoken vow, I'll return, not to live, but to make them remember my name for generations. When the sun rises, you're ready. Not a widow, not a slave, not a survivor, but someone launching a counterattack. You weren't born a warrior, but from now on, no one dares call you anything else, unless they want to face a woman who's tasted every layer of hell and still stands. 3 days after escaping the camp, you can't feel your feet. Each step tears new skin, adds new blisters. No more blood, just dried pus and purpled flesh. The girl has a fever. The old woman coughs until her ribs crack. Food is woody roots and puddle water, the color of horse dung. But no one complains, because complaints summon hunters. You've survived cold, humiliation, bondage. But this is the first time you feel yourself being erased, like a shadow fading from the world. And then you meet him. A lone hunter in the forest, sheepskin cloak, spear in hand, eyes full of suspicion. He doesn't kill you instantly. Maybe because you're too filthy to seem dangerous. Maybe because the old woman seizes in front of him. Maybe because he sees in your eyes something even beasts avoid, an unyielding will. He takes the 3 of you to a wooden cabin by the mountains. No questions, just water, dry wood, a tattered blanket. You don't sleep. You don't trust, but you drink. And for the first time in days, you breathe without hiding the sound. The man's name is Einar, a former mercenary who deserted the front lines over a foolish general and an oath not worth keeping. He doesn't care where you're from. He only asks, "Can you walk yet?" You nod. That night, you ask him to teach you how to trap rabbits. The next morning, you teach the girl to break branches silently. The old woman sits, sharpening stones into blades. One cabin, 3 broken people, but full of smoldering fire. You're no longer a slave, you're a survivor. Not from mercy, but from memory, discipline, and rage you've never let anyone see. Einar says, little but watches. One day, he leaves an old bough by the door, then vanishes. You understand, the signal, fend for yourself. And you're ready. Death no longer scares you. Hunger doesn't make you tremble. Cold doesn't make you shrink. You've become the person you once feared, someone who can kill without blinking, yet knows how to bind wounds with dried leaves. When the old woman dies, in her sleep, eyes closed, clutching a warm log, you don't cry. You dig her grave with your bare hands. No prayers, just a whisper. Thank you for teaching me to live. The girl can't bear it. She sobs. You hold her. The first time you've held anyone since your husband died. Not to comfort, but to pass on a bit of your cold blood. To live, you must be harder than stone, you say. After the burial, you and the girl move on. Following a makeshift compass, moss patterns on trees, memories of mountain ranges you've seen. You reach a small settlement by a bay. No one recognizes you. No one knows you were a slave. You don't speak. You just ask for work. Weaving wool, patching boats, fishing, cleaning dung. Whoever pays, you take. Whoever tries to touch you, you cut their fingers. Rumors spread fast. A woman with a strange girl, hands scarred, eyes unblinking, never asking names. They call you the ghost of the north. You don't correct them. A name like that keeps drunken men away. Gradually, you get a hut, a small skiff, a sharp knife, and your first night of real sleep in years. But you don't stop. One morning, sewing a tunic, the girl looks at you and asks, is surviving enough? You meet her gaze, then shake your head. No, you must live, and make them remember you. From then on, you teach her to set traps, to lie, to read people through their eyes. You don't teach her for revenge. You teach her never to be a slave like you were. Because this world doesn't need more victims. It needs witnesses who wield knives. And you, once captured, bound, priced like an animal, now sit by the fire, eyes fearless. You've survived, not by miracles, but by refusing to die until you allow it. And you haven't allowed it. Not yet. Because you know one thing. Surviving is just the first step. It's not freedom. It's a deferred sentence. And every morning, as you wake, wipe your knife with a coarse cloth. Check the tent's door. Listen for strange footsteps in the snow. You understand, you're still running from captors, from memories, from something nameless you hear every night when the fire dies and silence surrounds you. Like a familiar whisper, you still belong to that cage. 10 months pass since you escaped the camp. No bruises remain on your skin. No ropes bind your wrists. But inside, the chains are still ice cold. No one sees. Only you know. You've built a small tent by a cliff, where moonlight cuts through the door each night like a slash on memory. You live off fish, roots, and mending nets for villagers. The girl with you, now a young woman, learns fast, speaks little, and never parts with the small knife at her hip. The villagers fear you. They avoid your gaze but need your skills. When someone's injured, they call you. When a dog's sick, they call you. They don't know you were captured, killed, buried friends with bare hands. They only see a woman hard as stone, cunning as a snake, cold as snow. One time, a child goes missing in the forest. You find them, leg broken, shivering. You carry them back, set the bone, apply leaves, warm them with your breath, and a short lullaby you learned as a child. The child lives. Their mother kneels, thanking you. You say nothing. You turn away, heart trembling, because you remember long ago, no one saved you, no one carried you, no one sang to you. Running isn't freedom. It's just delaying the confrontation. And you know one day, they'll come back. Not the old guards, but new ones. Those who've heard of the surviving widow, the woman with death's eyes, the witch in the woods. A rumor, even a lie, is enough to make you a target. And one evening, it happens. An armed group arrives in the village. They ask for you. They carry bags of silver, lists of names, and eyes all too familiar. Eyes that once weighed you on a scale. The girl sees them first. She runs back, breathless. They're here. You don't panic. You nod, pack quickly. Nothing but a knife, herbs and old clothes. Not because you fear death, but because you won't be caught again. Not ever. You travel through the night, following a small stream, avoiding paths. You're not a wild beast. You're someone who remembers every route, every crevice, every swamp, deep enough to swallow a body. 3 days of fleeing. You sleep sitting, eat raw, listen to the wind like footsteps, and you realize you're not tired from your body. You're tired of the cycle. Run, hide, vanish, live. How much longer? When will you stop living, like a shadow? The girl asks, "Where are we going?" You don't answer, because you don't know. You only know if you keep running, you'll cease to be human. You'll turn to stone, to a monster, to a tale men tell to scare their wives and children. And that night, by a small fire in the deep forest, you say, "We're not running anymore." The girl's eyes widen. You repeat, "Tomorrow we go back. To die." She whispers. You look at the fire, then at her. "No. To take back my name." And for the first time since you were taken, you feel no fear. You don't want to hide. You want to stand tall, to look your hunters in the eye and say, "I'm not yours." Because if living means just running, that's not living. And you, with no kin, no husband, no gods to guard you, still have yourself. It's time to reclaim the one thing they haven't stolen. True freedom. Not in the woods, but in the world. Face to face. Blood for blood. Name for name. Existence for history. And you, once bought, beaten, buried alive in silence, now hold a knife, not to cut ropes, but to carve a path back. Back, not to the old village, not where Olaf lies buried, certainly not where you were taken. You return to a large town by the southern bay, where markets thrive, guards patrol, healers practice, traders gossip, and rumors travel faster than wind. You arrive, not as a widow or escaped slave, but as a healer, a title you claim, like the dark brown cloak draped from neck to ankles. Beneath that cloth, scars remain, but your hands are now as deft as a blade. You've learned, from the old woman in the forest tent, from your own half-dead survival, from watching your body break and mend. Now you know how to brew medicine from rotten mushrooms, apply prairie leaves to swelling, mix bitter tea to cool a seizing child's fever. You speak little. You quietly set up a tent outside the market, display clay jars, lay out strange roots, hang a deer bone by the entrance, something locals think ties you to forest spirits. The first day, no one approaches. By the third, an old woman hobbles up, asking for salve for cracked heels. You give her a jar of ointment, free. On the fifth, a mother brings her coughing child. You give them a tablet of roots, honey, and grey mushroom extract, bitter yet sweet, like the name you once bore. The child recovers, and people start calling you the healer from the deep woods. You smile. No one knows your real name, and that's what you want. You're not here for gratitude. You're here to wait, to watch, for every passerby to face your gaze, because you're searching. One of your captors was a mercenary from this region. You remember his face, his voice, his hand slapping your neck as he bound you. This one'll fetch a price, and you know, if you sit long enough, with a steady enough fire, the thread of vengeance tied in your heart will lead him back. In the meantime, you heal. You turn no one away. But with every poultice, you silently categorize people. The weak help, the cruel, avoid, the dangerous. Remember, some evenings, you sharpen your knife by candlelight, watching your shadow on the tent wall, wondering if you'd killed one more that day. Would things be different? But then you fold the cloth, stow the knife, and keep brewing medicine. Dying too quickly is forgettable. You want them to remember, to fear, to hurt long, as you hurt. One day, an older man, pot-bellied, grey-bearded, asks for stomach medicine. You hear him speak, and your spine goes cold. That voice, from 5 years ago, the man who laughed in the camp, kicked your ribs, sold the girl with you to some gaunt ship captain. He doesn't recognize you. Of course not. To him, you were one of hundreds. But to you, he's one. You give him medicine, carefully, precisely. A blend of slick roots, subtle poison from white pollen, and a drop of oil that causes relentless diarrhea, weakness, and immobility after 3 days. Not death, but pain, deep pain. When he returns to your tent, face green as a leaf, begging for a cure, you tilt your head, smile. You took the medicine, now only the spirits decide. He crawls away, and you sit still. No fight, no shouts, just silent revenge, deep as roots, cold as ice, enduring as your life. Your fame grows, the wealthy seek you, the poor trust you. Some nights, you treat 3 at once, one coughing, one with a broken arm, one poisoned by bad fish. You don't complain, don't mention fatigue. You work to conceal, work to survive, work to wait for the next chance. But sometimes, you pause, or touching a fevered child's skin, you see yourself. Stroking a woman's hair as she weeps over a miscarriage. You see your mother, smelling dried blood on your hands. You see your first night in the camp, and you know you're not at peace. The grudge inside you isn't rage, it's warm blood flowing through your body, keeping you alive, keeping you awake, keeping you remembering. You don't speak much of the past, but every night, you sit by the fire, stroking the old deer bone, closing your eyes, repeating, "I'm still here." And one day, you see another, younger, face scarred, walking into the market. He hasn't seen you, but you see him, and the fire in you flares. Not a consuming blaze, but the steady glow of someone who's waited long to look into the eyes of the man who kicked you into the mud, and smile. This time, you whisper, "I don't need a knife, I have memory, and a place high enough for you to enter my tent," bowing to beg for medicine. And when that day comes, you'll be ready. Because you're no longer pretending to be a healer, you've become one. But this healing hand is also the hand that knows how to make someone hurt to their bones. And then one day, when a child in the village collapses in the market, eyes rolled back, mouth foaming, the panicked crowd screaming and scattering, they don't call for a priest or run to the chieftain. They run to you. You're drying roots outside your tent when the shouts hit, "Healer, healer, help, my child's dying." No horns, no drums, no respectful summons, just feet trampling dirt, desperate sobs, and trembling hands thrusting a convulsing life into yours. You look at the child, no older than 3, thin, face purple, mouth locked. You don't ask questions. You kneel, pry open their mouth, use a fingernail to dislodge a choking root, then rub their stomach, press hard on their chest. The child stiffens. The crowd holds its breath. Then they cough, spit phlegm, and wail. The market erupts like a church bell ringing. The mother kneels, clutching your legs, stammering, "Thank you, thank you, thank you," but you say nothing. You just look up at the crowd, those who whispered you were a witch, avoided your eyes, called you the strange widow. And now, they're silent. They know. You're no longer someone living by luck. You're someone luck itself bows to. From that day, things change. Each morning, someone leaves dried meat, scrap cloth, a coin by your tent step. No one speaks, but they understand. They're repaying you, not because you demand it, but because they fear the day you're gone. A mild plague sweeps through the region in early autumn. Children fever, elders cough, blood. You're the first to spot mold in the grain stores, the first to burn disinfectant smoke with rosemary and garlic roots, the only one daring to enter every home, look straight at trembling faces, and touch their foreheads without flinching. You don't save everyone. Some die, but most survive. And in the village's eyes, you're no longer the healer from the deep woods. You're the one the village begs for. The chieftain visits your tent, not for a chat, but for advice. His wife has insomnia, persistent coughs, can't digest. Priests failed her. You take 2 pulse readings, 1 hot tea, 1 jar of medicinal liquor, and she sleeps through the night. He returns, bringing a gift, a fox fur cloak, a symbol of communal favor. You accept, not for glory, but because you know you need power, however small, to survive. And your greatest power now isn't from a knife. It's from being needed. You're needed, and you use it. When the village plans a new house, you suggest aligning the door with the wind to avoid mold. When they argue over land division, you propose splitting by wild herbs. Those with more medicinal roots yield forest to the other side. Your word isn't law, but everyone listens, because you speak rarely, and when you do, no one dares argue. Some say you're a healer god's descendant. Some say you hear roots whisper. Some say you died and came back. You don't correct them. You don't confirm. You just live on day by day, with a herb basket on your back, and memory like steel. But inside you, there's another wind, unseen. Each time you heal someone, you look at your hands, their calluses, old cuts, and whisper, "I'm not done with you yet." Because you know, one slip, one fall, and they'll return. Not the old ones, but new forces, those who hear your name and want to bury it in mud. Because an independent, skilled woman who relies on no one is always a thorn in society's eye. But this time, you don't run. You have a foundation. People trust you. The girl who fled with you, now your apprentice. The child you saved, now guarding your tent while you sleep. You have fire, not just in your heart, but in others' eyes. They see you as essential to this place, and you understand. Finally, you don't have to run. You stay, head high, and wait, not in fear, but ready. Because if someone comes with chains next time, you won't need a knife. You have a village behind you, and this time, you'll be the one passing judgment. But justice, true justice, is never served in the light. It's conceived in silence, nurtured by memory, and executed in shadow. So after saving lives, healing sick, advising on land disputes, quelling plagues, sitting amid thanks and awed gazes, you quietly slip behind your tent's curtain, a place no one enters, not even your apprentice, unless you allow it. That space isn't a medicine store, not for honey or roots. It's where you keep forgotten lives and the evidence to claim the justice you swore to yourself while crawling in mud with bound hands. The room behind the tent is small, barely fits one person, but 3 walls are draped in thick black sackcloth, blocking wind and eyes. At the center is a low oak table, its surface holding a hand-drawn map, marking every slave camp, mercenary trails, trading posts, names etched in your memory. Beside the map, a notebook. Each page lists a name, no surnames, just names, builds, voices, sweat smells, how they tie their boots, moles behind ears, scars on napes. You've recorded for 4 years. The more people come to you for healing, the more details you recall, and you piece them together like weaving a net, not for fish, but for those who thought you no longer existed. There's a chest, hidden under the floor, beneath a coarse wool rug. Inside, no medicine or coins, just blood-stained cloth, a carved wooden token from a slaver gang, a silver ring you tore from a camp guard's hand when he tried something, and a rotted rope. The only thing you kept from your capture, not for memory, but for an oath. You tell no one, even your apprentice, who fled forests with you, only knows you like quiet in the back. But sometimes, you catch her eyeing the black curtain, suspicious, and you know one day, you'll tell her. When she's ready to hold a knife, not just for cutting herbs, but for guarding memories like yours. The small room has a hidden drawer in the wall. Inside, you keep things villagers bring to check. A letter from a missing husband, a scarf from a child lost after market, a necklace from an unidentified body washed ashore. They bring them, you take them. Instead of burning them as priests advise, you keep them. Each item is a buried pain, and you're the only one who remembers, because beyond healing, you're a keeper of truth. Not the truth everyone wants to hear, but the truth no one dares face. Deaths unquestioned, bruises unconfessed, disappearances brushed off as taken by spirits. You don't believe in spirits. You believe silence is a tool for the powerful, and you, silent for years, now tear it apart, with memory, calloused hands, nails that dug graves for friends. Some nights, you sit alone in the secret room, open the notebook, read each line. Man with Eastern accent, wolf tattoo on left chest, drinks only with right hand, axe scar on forehead, pushed me into an iron stake, wore a grooved silver ring. Each description is a carving, and you tell yourself, one day they'll walk into this village, into this tent, not knowing the hand giving them medicine is writing their names on a final list. You may not kill anyone, you may never spill blood again, but you'll bring each one to where they belong, with hands, words, eyes. You know where brokers hide, where slave posts operate, who profits from forgotten corpses, and you let the fire smolder, like in a hearth, a healing fire, but also a vengeful one. They call you the village goddess. You smile, but what goddess keeps a knife behind her back, a ledger behind cloth, old blood in a chest? No, you're not a goddess. You're a consequence. the consequence of ignored cruelty, of unheard screams, of thousands of women's hands bound, torn, sold, forgotten. The room behind your tent is a graveyard of memories, and you're its keeper. No lamp needed, no lock, because your memories don't need locks to bind anyone. They're sharp enough, deep enough, persistent enough to make the guilty tie their own nooses. One day, you'll open this door for the world to see, but not today. Today, you step out of the tent, holding a steaming pot, eyes calm, smiling at a new visitor. You fetch medicine, you heal, you live like an ordinary person, and the secret room behind, it waits quietly, like you. And then one afternoon, in the fading sunlight, filtering through the hide tent's roof, as you pound herbs by the fire, hands sticky with sap, hair tangled from mist, your apprentice pulls back the curtain, face pale. Someone wants to meet you alone, she whispers. A stranger. You look into her eyes of a child who saw death in the forest, and you understand, no questions needed. He's sitting outside the tent, head bowed, hood covering half his face, a long, filthy cloak reaching his ankles, caked with road dust. You stand at the threshold, silent. A cold gust lifts the cloth, revealing one side of his face, a long scar from forehead to cheek, faint but unmistakable. It's him, one of those who dragged you from your tent years ago, who bound your hands, kicked you into mud, laughed as you cried, and said, "This one's not tame, sell her cheap." He looks up, sunken, bloodshot eyes, and in a strange moment, you see something you never thought you'd see on that face. Pleading. "Please," he says hoarsely. "I heard you can heal. I'm sick. Very sick. No one can cure me. I'll pay any price." You don't answer immediately. You just sit, still holding the wooden pestle, eyes locked on him, as if seeing through flesh and bone to that old scene. The crocodile skin belt, the wolf tooth necklace, the voice still harsh, but now laced with desperation. No longer a hunter of men, now a man hunted by life. You invite him into the tent, sit him across from the hearth, pour hot water. He trembles, not from cold, but fever, pulse erratic, hands twitching, a form of nerve poisoning, likely from bad liquor or toxic roots. You know the cure, but you don't rush. "Do you remember me?" you ask. He blinks, then freezes, starts looking closer, and when he realizes, he slumps, exhaling like a man sentenced to death. I didn't know. I just followed orders. I didn't. You raise a hand, or quiet, not for excuses. Silence engulfs the tent. You prepare medicine. No poison, nothing added, just proper herbs. You don't need to kill. Death isn't enough for a sentence like this. You want him to live, to understand, to remember. You make him drink. He vomits blood, then cries, not from pain, but shame, maybe for the first time. "Forgive me," he repeats like a child. "I didn't know you survived. I didn't think I'd become someone you'd kneel to for your life." You cut in. He buries his face, and you exhale, light as smoke. No gloating, no triumph, just an old bloodline draining from a wound yet to close. "You'll live," you say, but you don't leave this village. Every day you'll chop wood, fetch water, tend lame horses, no liquor, no knives, and you don't leave my sight. "A servant," he gasps. "A person," you reply. "Something you've never been." Rumors spread through the village. The stranger, once a mercenary, now kneels for medicine, then hauls water for the healer each morning. Some ask, you don't answer. Some laugh, you don't care. The only one who needs to know the reason is you, and him. Weeks later, his illness eases. He avoids your eyes, but he works. No complaints, no liquor, no touching anyone. You don't forgive, but you don't avenge as he expects, because your silence is the heaviest sentence. Every time he passes the curtain to the back room, where memories are kept, you see him shudder, as if the black cloth could speak. One night, he stands outside your tent, hands clenched, whispering, "Can I go now?" You look at him. Moonlight spills through the tent's roof, casting his long scar like a branded punishment. "You can go," you say. "But if you return to your old ways, I'll know, and next time, I won't heal." He nods, eyes wet, then vanishes into the mist. Small as a lost child, you return to the secret room, open the notebook. His name, you cross out, not from forgiveness, but from completion. And you know, tomorrow another will come. Maybe as a victim, maybe as a priest, maybe as someone you once loved. But this time, you're ready, because you're not just a healer. You're the place where they finally kneel to learn what justice is. And perhaps because of that, for the first time in your life, you're invited, not to a trial, not to a market, not to a battlefield, but to a dining table, a real one. Fine wood, white tablecloth, gleaming copper plates, mead poured into glass goblets instead of wooden bowls. The invitation comes from the chieftain's wife, the woman who once coughed blood and went sleepless for 4 months. Now, every time she closes her eyes, it's because of your tea, and when she opens them, it's to remind her husband, to thank the healer. You accept, not out of hunger, not for prestige, but because you want to walk into the village's most powerful house, as an equal, not the one who knelt for mercy, not the girl who was sold, certainly not the witch whispered about, but a woman with a place built from blood, fingernails, and memories no one dares touch. You arrive on time. Your apprentice follows, eyes wide at the sight. Flickering candles, the rich smell of roasted meat, broad-shouldered men drawing knives, only to cut bread, not throats. The chieftain stands as you enter. No one's ever done that for you before. He says, "We owe you. Today, we want to do right." You say nothing, just nod, pull out a chair, and sit, as if you were born to belong there. But in your heart, a beat stumbles, not from nerves, but because memory never quiets. Every wall hung with animal hides in that room, every carved beam on the ceiling, every curious glance from the guests. They remind you of the tent that bound you years ago, the stench of the camp, the groans after a night dragged across dirt, and you have to grip the spoon tightly to keep it from falling. The feast unfolds in respectful silence. They talk crops, they talk salt prices, hunting season, shifting winds, but every eye quietly slides to you, as if checking, is it true? A woman sits here, not as anyone's wife, anyone's daughter, with no clan behind her. You know, and you let them look, because each glance is a confession. They can do nothing else. At the end, the chieftain raises his glass. He speaks of the time his grandson had a high fever, saved only by you, of his wife nearly dying, of villagers learning to plant herbs because of you. We thought you were a witch, he chuckles. Now we know, you're just the only one who let herself burn before learning to shine.
Everyone laughs.
You don't, but you raise your glass and drink. The mead burns your throat like fire, but this time you don't flinch. After the meal, the chieftain pulls you aside, not to threaten, but to offer, would you take a seat on the village council, a chair, legitimate? You look at him, at the hand that once held a sword, at the eyes that once saw you through another man's shoulder. Then you say, I'll think about it. Not yes, not no, but the words of someone who knows she has a choice. On the way back, your apprentice walks beside you, eyes gleaming. They really respect you. You shake your head. They need me. Need breeds respect. So, will you take the council seat? She asks. You're silent for a long time, then say softly, only if I'm sure the chair isn't a trap lined with furs. That night, you don't return to the tent right away. You circle to the back, open the secret room, light a small candle. You pull out the notebook, open the last page. Right, today, I wasn't punished. I was invited to dine. You sit by that notebook for a long time, write nothing more. Don't cry, don't tremble. Just stare at the words as if they're a freshly healed scar, still red, but no longer bleeding. You haven't forgiven the world, but at least today, it sat at a table with you. No whips, no hidden knives, no ropes around your neck, and that for you is a start. Not peace, but the first pause after years of living on survival instinct. A pause you fought a lifetime to claim, not to rest, but to prepare. Because you know, the real battle is just beginning. And when the first winter wind blows through the tent's roof, carrying cold and howls from the deep forest, you don't sit by the hearth warming your hands like other women. You stand, step outside, pull the heavy tent flap aside, then say to your apprentice, now a strong young woman, her eyes no longer fearful, it's time. No explanation needed, she nods. And that afternoon, behind the medicine tent, clacking sounds begin, wood striking bone, stones hitting knives, steady footsteps on damp earth. Behind the healing room, you build a small yard, not for planting herbs, but for training. You don't wait for permission. You don't ask the council. You start with 3. Your apprentice, a young wife whose husband's been gone 3 seasons, and an old widow whose teeth were broken, refusing to marry her daughter to a neighbor. 3 people, 3 fates, but one shared look. They've had enough. You don't teach them to wield swords like men. You teach them to survive. First lesson. A knife isn't for killing. It's a boundary. You hold a wooden knife, point to your palm. When you draw it, you're drawing a line that says, cross this, and it's blood. They listen. They're not skilled yet. Some drop the knife. Some tremble holding it. But you're patient, because you know, hands that carried buckets, gathered wood, sewed tunics, need time to remember. They can fight back. Week 2, you teach them to hold staffs, not to strike, but to block. Then how to bolt a door, how to hear footsteps at night, how to fake a fall, to draw a hidden weapon from a skirt. You teach one thing at a time, in silence. No fanfare, no torches, because you know a woman's strength isn't in shouting, but in preparing quietly until no one expects it. By week 4, the group is 8. Some bring children, some hide bruises under tunics. One can't speak, throat once choked, but her eyes never leave the knife's path you show. They call you sister, lady, healer, guide. You don't correct them, because to you titles matter less than them. Learning to stand tall, when villagers whisper, women learning to fight. You don't deny it. You tell the chieftain plainly, I teach them not to die. He's silent, doesn't approve, but doesn't dare forbid, because he knows, if anyone dares enter his tent at night, to save his wife from an asthma attack, it's you. And if you're touched, the village will have no one else willing to dip their hands in blood again. Your apprentice becomes the best. One afternoon, when a drunk grabs her sleeve, dragging her to a market corner, she twists his finger back, draws a small knife from her sleeve, and drives it into the wooden table beside his pinky, not touching skin, but close enough to make him wet himself. From that day, no one laughs at women learning knives. They avoid the gazes of women walking together. They don't touch the uninvited. A silence spreads, not of fear, but of realization. The prey now bites. You don't call it a team, not a guild, not an army. You call them those who are forced to endure. And you tell them, one stormy night, as fire flickers on old scars, we're not here to fight, we're here to live. But if someone forces us to choose between wounds and silence, we'll make the wounds theirs. The room behind the tent now has a new compartment for wooden knives, cloth ropes, hand models. No one enters, except those you teach. You don't lock it, but anyone stepping in understands this is where hidden pain is sharpened into fangs. When winter comes, a man from another village arrives to court a woman in your group. He says, she's gentle, hard-working, quiet, and I have 3 cows. The woman looks at you. You nod. She steps forward, draws a wooden knife, places it on the table before him, and says, I'm not quiet anymore. If you can handle that, come back. He doesn't. You don't console her. You just keep teaching. Each woman is a piece of your past. Every time they stand, you see yourself long ago, gaunt, bound, trembling, and you whisper to that girl in memory, you didn't die. You became what makes others fear killing you. You don't need glory. But now, when you cross the market, children look up, men step aside, and women smile, hands brushing knives at their hips, not to threaten, but to remind each other. We don't live bowed anymore. You don't sit quietly by the hearth. You've given women what was stolen for 1,000 years, the right to defend, and you know that fire, once kindled, will never go out. But fire, whether smoldering or blazing, always tempts others to touch it, to claim it, or to snuff it out. And then, one misty morning, as you dry roots behind the tent, the market guard arrives, panting. The chieftain summons the healer to the great house. Urgent matter. You wipe your hands. No rush. Because long ago, nothing felt urgent anymore, except the safety of those you've taught, healed, trusted. You walk through the early wind, past wooden houses, thatched with dry grass, past bowed gazes, from those who once sneered, now only daring to watch from behind curtains. In the great house, the chieftain sits upright, beard neat, new cloak. Beside him, his wife, the woman you saved. Her eyes on you are strange, not cold, but no longer warm. You sense it. You smell a ceremony. or a disguised negotiation. He doesn't mince words. "Healer," he says, "you're the strongest woman I've known, not just skilled in medicine, but revered by the village. You make women stand tall, men wary. I believe this village would be stronger if you led with me." You're not surprised. You think it's finally come. The most powerful man in the village, facing a woman who fears nothing, chooses not to fight her, but to claim her. "Are you proposing marriage?" you ask, eyebrow slightly raised. "A proposal to share power, duty, and a bed," he smiles. You don't smile. You place your small knife on the wooden table between you. The knife you use to carve roots, split wood, and sometimes remind men your hands don't just heal. "This," you say, "is the only thing I share with anyone who'd lead with me. If they can hold it, not tremble, not back away, I'll consider sharing power." The room goes silent. His wife stiffens. The chieftain doesn't rage, but his eyes darken. He doesn't touch the knife. He says, "You're making this hard for yourself." "No," you reply. "I'm keeping myself from being made hard." You stand slowly. Pick up the knife. Tuck it into your belt, as if securing your very being. "I was dragged from my home before I knew what freedom was," you say. "I survived forests, ate rotten roots, buried friends with bare hands. I'm not something to be wed to calm the village. I'm not a badge for your cloak." You walk out of the great house. No one stops you. No one dares. Word spreads faster than fire. The healer refused the chieftain's proposal. She offered a knife instead of wedding flowers. She challenged power. But you don't care about whispers. You care about the eyes of the women you taught, and each one, meeting you in the market, gives a slight nod. No words needed. They understand. You don't just live for yourself. From that day, the chieftain's demeanor shifts. Not hostile, but distant. Invitations to feasts stop. Council meetings no longer mention you. Yet strangely, villagers seek you more. They bring fevered children, roots to identify, letters from afar to read. They don't need titles, they need truth. And the truth is, you're who they trust. One night, your apprentice asks, if you'd accepted, would things be easier? You look at the fire, then at your hands that trembled when bound, now steady as stone. Easier, maybe, you say. But easy doesn't make us stronger. You keep teaching, keep healing. But now, you add a new lesson, how to refuse power offered wrongly. You teach women to spot when a hug is to hold, and when it's to choke, when an invitation is respect, and when it's velvet shackles. You never needed a man to be whole, and you're not starting now, not when the fire in you is enough to warm the coldest souls in this village. When spring comes, grass sprouting outside your tent, people see you teaching young girls to carve sticks into knife handles. A man passing by jokes, if they grow up like you, who'd dare marry them? You turn, smile. They don't need to be married, they need to choose. Then you keep teaching. Behind you, the sky blazes, not because anyone gave you light, but because you kindled it, spark by spark, and now, you're sharing it, like a fire that never dies, until that fire must burn everything, to keep what matters most, freedom. It starts with a whisper in the market. Strangers from the northern village, dressed as merchants, but asking too much, asking about the woman who was a slave, about the healer who wields knives, about the room behind the tent. You hear, of course. Your ears are sharper than anyone who's lived in forests, but you don't show panic. You start burning old notes, packing herbs into cloth sacks, distributing wooden knives and training materials to each woman you've taught. Your apprentice asks, "Are we leaving the village?" You shake your head. "Not leaving, but we must be ready." Then, one late afternoon, as the sun fades like a bloodstain over the snowy hill, you see him, wolf fur cloak, iron-gloved hands, eyes like burning coals, not a merchant, not a wanderer, a hunter of people. He looks at you from afar, doesn't approach, just tilts his head as if asking, "Remember me?" You do, vividly. He's the last one who beat you in the camp, the one who choked the girl with you to death when she tried to escape, the one whose name you never crossed out in your notebook because you saved him for the end. You return to your tent. That night, you don't sleep. You write a letter to your apprentice, hidden at the chest's bottom. "If I don't return tomorrow, keep teaching, but don't teach killing, teach living." You take the old knife, the one from the night you escaped the camp, and sit, waiting. But the next morning, no one comes. No strange footprints in the snow, no knocks, no smell of blood, just silence. And you know the trap is set, not at your door, but at the one place you can't avoid, the village's great house. That afternoon, a messenger arrives. The chieftain summons all women who learned knives to the great house, says it's a check for village safety. You listen, blood in your ears cold as ice. You don't go, you send your apprentice instead. You say, don't enter, just listen from afar. And what she brings back makes your heart clench. Inside the great house, the chieftain, his wife, and a stranger are interrogating each woman, asking what they learned, who taught them, if they have weapons, if they've heard talk of rebellion. He, the man with coal-burning eyes, stands in the back, silent, but taking notes. You know, this isn't benign, this is a purge, and you, the one who lit the fire, are the spark they aim to snuff first. You have one night, and you use that night to do what you never thought you'd do. Burn down the place that saved you. You go to the great house at midnight. No guards. Who'd suspect the healing woman would wield a torch? You pour pine resin into door cracks, stuff rags into the straw roof, sprinkle black ash on wooden walls. Then you light the fire. No shouts, no tears. You stand there, in a thick cloak, gripping the torch, watching flames devour beams, walls, symbols of power that once tried to make you a controlled emblem. No one's inside. You made sure of that. This isn't killing, it's a warning. All the first to arrive are the guards. They shout, they panic, they try to save it. Too late. The fire roars like a collapsing mountain. Your apprentice comes to your side. Or, what now? You don't look at her. You don't look at the fire. You say, go, before anyone understands. You two leave the village in the snowy night. Not through the main gate, not by the docks, through the forest, like before. Each step resurrects a buried memory. Each branch snapping your cloak reminds you. You're not free yet, but you've never died. By morning, the village talks of the mad healer. She burned everything. No one knows why. Must be witchcraft. But in the hearts of the women you taught, healed, gave the look of defiance. They know, and they stay silent. You build a new tent on a snowy hilltop. No one comes. No one dares.
But from afar!
When hearth smoke rises, people think someone's still keeping the fire. You don't look back. Not from regret, but because behind is just an old village. Ahead is a will that won't die. And you burned from within, long ago. Now no, sometimes. You must burn everything to have a place to stand tall. And so you stand on that white hilltop, where no one dares come, where no one has the courage to call you by old names. No longer the healer, the medicine woman, certainly not someone's wife, someone's slave, or the council's threat. You become something untouchable, unmeasurable, unlabelable, and like all things beyond control, you become legend. At first it's whispers, a woman living alone in the snow, driving a knife into a log each morning to wake the spirits. Her eyes have seen death, and survived to see it again each night. She burned the chieftain's house, but the fire didn't burn her, only the lies. Then the whispers travel down the river, from village to village. A boatman says, passing the region, he saw steady hearth smoke, heard distant knife chops on wood. No person, just a shadow, he says, but that shadow made me row faster. Children in downstream villages tell of the white ghost, appearing on hilltops when snow falls, staff in hand, eyes piercing fog. A crying child is hushed, quiet, or she'll come for real. Merchants stop at taverns, talk of a woman who heals mind wounds, but only if you tell the truth. They say, she doesn't take coin, she takes silence. She asks the question that makes you unable to lie. An old guard says, I stood at the village gate when the fire burned. I saw her walk away, never looking back, back straight as a mast. I stopped beating my wife after that. Some don't believe. They say, just a legend. A woman can't burn a whole system, but they don't say it loudly, because they know, somewhere maybe by a stream, someone's listening. You live quietly, never stay long in one place. You pitch tents by rivers, forests, rock hollows. Each place you go, you leave a mark, a handful of dried herbs, a stone carved into an eye, a knife scar deep in a tree, saying, I passed here, and I'm still alive. Women start finding you, not with words but signals. They tie red cloth to branches, bury a ring under stream rocks, knock 3 times on market posts, and you understand. You come, heal, teach, then leave. No one catches your name. Only one child dares ask, "Who are you really?" You smile. The person your mother forgot she could become. Your legend isn't just a warning. It keeps women's backs straight, makes men think before striking, makes slavers glance over their shoulders. One day, you pass the old market. No one recognizes you. Hood up, head low, herb basket, like any others. But a young woman, new unfamiliar, approaches, bows low, whispers, "Can you teach me to keep my daughter safe?" You look at her. She doesn't tremble, but her eyes are wet. You nod, then follow me to the river, you say. And so, by that river, once the line between life and death, captivity and escape, you start something new, a place you might call home, not to rest, but to pass on. People come, learn, leave. You don't keep anyone. You keep one thing: they'll never bow again. Sometimes, alone by the water, you think of the girl from long ago, dragged from home, crawling through mud, burying a friend with bare hands, and you whisper, "You didn't die for nothing. You became a wave, and now you flow through this river." You don't need a gravestone, no hymns, just the river carrying your story farther, far enough that no one remembers your name, but all know there was a woman who refused silence, and that refusal made the river change its course. But even rivers flow to strange lands, where your name's unheard, where your legend is a faint echo carried off by wind through great houses and crowded markets. So you go there, a larger, busier, richer village, stone walls instead of wood, where women still bow and men speak as law, where people live not to survive, but to preserve an order they think natural. You arrive with your herb basket, as always. No followers, no title, just a stranger. You pitch a temporary tent at the market's edge, set out herb jars, hang dried roots to ward off evil, as is custom. Then you sit, waiting. No advertising, no shouting. You know those who need you will come. But the next morning, before any patient arrives, a group of men appears. Fur cloaks, silver belts, beast-hide boots, the kind who give orders, never ask. The leader, square-jawed, voice like a hammer on wood, asks, "Who are you?" "You. Got a permit?" You answer calmly, "I don't need permits. I heal." He smirks. Heal what? Women thinking they can play doctor. The group roars with laughter, bouncing off the market like slaps to your face. But you don't bow. You look straight, then lift a jar beside you, open it. This is salve for boils that saved a chieftain's son in the north. And this, you point to a leaf bundle, helped an old woman by a river walk after 4 seasons bedridden. If you think mocking heals better, I invite you to eat these leaves and find out. The crowd falls silent, not from fear, but surprise. The square-jawed man narrows his eyes. "Threatening me?" "No," you reply. "I'm threatening the sickness in your head, the one that thinks men can stop blood with laughter." This time, no one responds, but no one leaves. You sit there all day, no patience. Passers-by stare, point. Children throw stones, giggling. Grey-haired witch. A drunk pisses near your tent, shouting, "Burn her." You don't anger, but you know, this place has never heard of a woman without fear, and that panics them. What panics men? They mock or destroy. By the 3rd day, a young girl sneaks over, eyes bruised, with wrist marked purple. She doesn't speak, just shows her trembling hand. You don't ask. You apply salve, bandage it, slip her a small vial. If he touches you again, put 3 drops in his ale. Won't kill, but he'll vomit till he can't stand. She doesn't cry, just whispers, "Thank you." The next day, an old woman comes for joint pain, then a coughing child, then a man with a broken leg. You heal, take no coin, but each time you touch a wound, their eyes shift from doubt to fear, mixed with awe. The fur-clad men return. No laughter this time. They watch silently, then ask, "Where'd you learn?" You answer, "From forests, from blood, from surviving when everyone wanted me gone." They don't ask more, but they don't dare drive you out either. A week later, you're still there. The tent's no bigger, but the line of people waiting is longer. Some seek medicine, some just sit near you, as if your presence alone keeps them from falling. Rumors spread. She survived being sold. She burned a chieftain's house and vanished like wind. She teaches women not to fear, and when people speak, they no longer laugh. They whisper, as if afraid. The legendary woman is listening. You know legends can't live in a village still growing, but you don't need them to believe yet. You just need to plant. Because you know, one day, when a girl in this village grows up and sees her mother smile after a beating, she'll ask, "Who made you dare smile?" And the mother will answer, "A woman came here once. She brought medicine, but the greatest thing she left was fire." And you know, when a small flame can burn through to places thought to be only cold stone, sooner or later, someone more powerful will notice that light. You don't wait for it, but it comes, like a black wave, crashing onto a quiet riverbank. That morning, as you're pounding herbs outside your tent, a band of cavalry arrives. They don't shout, don't draw swords. They just halt, cold iron glinting in the mist. Then one of them, not looking at you, but at the silent crowd gathering around, speaks. By order of King Harald, the one called the woman who burned the villages must present herself before the royal palace. No one speaks. You stand, wipe your hands, look into the soldier's eyes. Does this person have no name? You ask. We have only a description. Lives alone, heals, defied authority, and shows signs of stirring women in the southern villages. You smile faintly. Sounds like someone I once knew, but sadly, she died long ago. He studies you closer. Are you? No, you cut in. I'm an old healer, lived in deep forests. Now I just want to cure and die in peace. He hesitates, then says, "Do you know who she might be?" You look at him, then shift your voice. Hoarse, low, blunt. If such a person exists, it's probably a man. How could a woman dare burn a chieftain's house and survive? The cavalry laughs. One nods. Fair point. They leave, unquestioning. Only a few odd glances linger from the onlookers. A child whispers. Why'd her voice sound like the blacksmith's? You return to your tent. Quietly close the flap. Sit. Your heart doesn't race, but your spirit sinks. Not from fear, but from knowing the rumors have outrun you. And when they reach a king's ears, no place is safe anymore. That night, you open the old notebook. The name of the square-jawed soldier from the last village is crossed out, not because you killed him, but because you no longer need to recall that anger. But you add a new line. Harald, king, calls my name without knowing who I am. You know it's not the king himself who remembers you. Someone reported you. Maybe someone you saved, and maybe a woman you taught, who later feared and betrayed you. Maybe your old apprentice, interrogated and broken. Whoever it was, you don't hate them, because you know, not everyone can hold fire when the north wind blows. And you also know, you must go. You pack that night, bundle herbs, ember ashes, a few old clothes, then burn the tent. The fire isn't large, but bright enough to light the river bend. Villagers rush over, panicked. Where are you going? You don't answer. Just place a hand on a young girl's shoulder. When you can heal without fearing who asks, who taught you this? You'll know I haven't gone anywhere. You leave in silence. But this time, not alone. Your first apprentice, who followed you through forests, learned to break chains, waits at the village edge. You knew you'd need me. You're not surprised. You nod, and you know the way to the palace. She nods. You smile. Good. Then we go meet the king. But not to kneel. You both set out. Along the way, whispers follow. Is that her? The one who burned the house? The one teaching women knives? You don't respond. Don't confirm. But in every village you pass, a few more girls join. Some carry knives. Some carry herbs. Some carry nothing but eyes, once beaten but never broken. A nameless band, no flag, no mission, but united by one reason, to face the man who dares call their name, without knowing who they are. You reach the kingdom's border in 3 weeks. When guards ask your identity, you step forward, shift your voice, hoarse, low, blunt, and say, "I'm a healer. Name's Olin. I heard the king summoned me." The guard glances, then nods. Go straight. Don't talk much. You and your companions enter the domain of a man who thought he could hunt you like an animal. But you don't come to hide, not to beg mercy. and certainly not to be a symbol for power that wields only whips and orders. You come to teach them that, sometimes to control a name, you must learn to pronounce the truth, and the truth is, you don't come to submit. As guards lead you through the city gate, past towering stone walls, where the king's banners flap in the sea wind, they don't know who you are, but they sense something's wrong. Not because you're alone, but because you're fearless. The fearless always make the powerful uneasy. You're brought to a grey stone antehall, vast and empty. King Harald sits on his throne, crimson cloak, holding a silver wolf-headed scepter. He's not old, but his eyes have seen too many kneel. Perhaps that's why, when you enter, head unbowed, hood still on, he narrows his eyes, not angry, just curious, like a hunter seeing a beast that doesn't run. "You're Olin, the healer?" he asks. You nod. "You're the one healing villagers, burning chieftains' houses, teaching women knives." "No," you reply. "I'm the one helping them remember they have hands." The king doesn't laugh. His courtiers chuckle, but he raises a hand, and they silence. "I didn't summon you for trial," he says. "If I wanted that, my soldiers wouldn't have led you through the gate alive. I called you because I need you." You look at him. "Don't trust, don't argue, just wait. My treasury has gold," he says, "but my people fear. There are rebels, rumors, women defying husbands, healers I can't control. I need a symbol, someone who was a slave, now strong, to stand with me. With me you'll have everything, a grand tent, protection, gold, a title. Just stand before the people and say, 'The king is the healer.'" You stay silent for a long time, so long the attendants fidget. But you only pull a small cloth bundle from your cloak, unwrap it, a rusted silver coin, once traded for you for 3 barrels of salt years ago. You place it on the stone steps between the throne and your feet. "Wealth," you say, "can buy silence, but what I have isn't for sale." Harald tilts his head. "What do you want then?" You don't answer immediately. You walk a circle, to the antehall's window, look out at the harbor. Long, low Viking ships are moored at the docks, red-painted, oak-planked, wide sails, dragon prows, curling with the waves. And you know, the answer isn't in the hall, but on the water. "I want a ship," you say, not turning back. The room falls silent, then murmurs, "A ship? For what? She can't sail." Harald frowns. "A ship means freedom. You plan to leave. You turn. No, I plan to sail to every village by river, sea, forest, to open every locked door, teach every silenced woman, heal diseases you don't know the names of. And if you call that rebellion, fire your arrows when I'm at sea." The king stares long, then laughs, not mocking, but the laugh of someone who's seen something he can't grasp. "You won't serve me?" he asks again. "No," you say, "but I won't fight you. If you don't fight women." He nods. "A ship you'll have, but remember, the sea's not kind like the forest, and legends can't row boats." You smile. "I don't row alone." And true enough, the next morning, as the ship is pulled from the boatyard, one by one they come to you, your apprentice, the woman whose arm was broken years ago, the old widow who guarded your tent while you slept, the children you cured of fever. Each takes a task. One mends sails, one planes planks, one mixes pitch for seams. No one commands, but all know this journey isn't to flee, it's to spread. You step onto the deck, place a hand on the wooden rail, sea wind lashes your face, but this time you don't feel cold. You feel freedom unfolding ahead, wave by wave, and you know when a woman once sold can demand a kingdom give her a ship, nothing is impossible anymore, except one thing you still haven't forgotten. As the sail rises, as oars beat the silver-grey sea, as the ship glides past familiar cliffs, you don't think of glory, not of victory, not of gratitude or songs. You think only of an old tent, a rope that cut your wrists, a cloth smelling of blood, a fire that burned through silence, and those who wanted you dead. The journey back doesn't soothe that fire, it only gives it wind. You don't return with banners or trumpets. Your ship, long, low, unpainted, unadorned, silently glides into the narrow river where you fled that first snowy night. The villagers there don't recognize you at first. They see a band of women, hair wind-tossed, hands calloused, eyes like bronze mirrors, stepping onto the bank without needing welcome. You're the last to leave the ship. You walk slowly, as if the earth that once betrayed you must now make peace, inch by inch. Is she the one who burned the chieftain's house? A child asks, clutching their mother's sleeve. You don't answer, but you walk straight to the market center, stand on the dirt where the village hall once stood, and you begin to speak. Not preach, not threaten. You recount from the start, leaving out no detail. You tell of the night you were taken, the years sold, the dried blood on your back, the bone-piercing cold crawling through snow, the stench of goat dung in the first tent. You tell of women beaten, scorned, hidden in houses, dying as if they'd never lived. You tell of the first knife you held, not to kill, but to not die. And you tell, most importantly, of the feeling of standing straight, knowing you could be stoned, burned, mocked. No one speaks, but the crowd grows. Elders, children, widows, soldiers' wives, even some men linger behind market posts, as if wanting to hear but not daring to admit it. Your old apprentice stands beside you, not interrupting. She places a small wooden knife on the market table, and one by one, people come. Quietly, no fanfare. They touch the knife, then place something on the table, a stone, an old cloth, an empty medicine vial, like a silent oath. You don't cry, but the fire in your chest burns hot, as if flaring again, not to destroy, but to shine. That night, you don't sleep on the ship. You sleep in the old tent, where you taught the first woman to hide a knife under her cloak. The smell of dry grass, wind through wall cracks, flickering lamplight, all the same, but you're not. You're now the one who walked through a palace, looked a king in the eye, and demanded a ship instead of a throne. And now, you return not to stay, but to spark something that will outlive you. The next morning, as you open your eyes, your apprentice sits by the fire. She says, people from another village came asking, can they invite you to speak? You nod, but don't answer right away. You step outside, look east, where the river meets the sea. Your ship waits, sails folded, planks wet with dew. You know the fire in you doesn't fade, because it never should. It's what keeps you alive, what makes you go, what makes others rise. You once thought you'd die in a small nameless tent, quietly, but now you know, you're a marker. Not because you're great, but because you didn't bow. The journey back isn't to end, it's to begin again, from where pain took root. And this time, you don't go alone. You go with those who learn to keep fire, and more importantly, learn to pass it on. But there's one place you haven't returned to, a place not just old, but the first wound, your village, where you were taken, sold, dragged through goat dung with a moldy rag gagging your mouth. You know the day will come to return there, not because you have something to reclaim, but because you need to face the starting point, to know you've truly left it behind. That afternoon, your ship docks at the shallow bank below the old hill. You recognize every curve of the land, every tree grown taller, every stone you once used to claw through binding ropes. Everything's still there, yet, strangely, nothing matches memory. Your old village is no longer the same. No more low, sagging roofs thatched with damp straw. Instead, new wooden tents, sturdier. No more thorn fences barring women from the market. Now children run through as if no rules ever bound them. The small market's busier, but quieter. People don't shout, don't argue. They glance at each other, then at you, as if trying to verify a vague memory. You climb the hill, leading a small group. Your apprentice, a widow from a coastal village, 3 women who've been with you from the start. They don't speak, just walk close, backs straight, steps steady. You know whatever happens, you're no longer the lone one returning with scars. At the village center, before what was once the great house, now just a grassy foundation, a group waits. Not large, unarmed, but their eyes mix fear, surprise, and hope. An old woman steps forward. Her hands tremble, her voice doesn't. Are you the one they talk of? The one who burned the house, who teaches women knives? You nod. She doesn't shrink back. She steps closer, pulls a small object from her cloak, a braided hair cord. My daughter made this, before she was taken like you were. She said, if the woman from the legend ever returned, she wanted to meet her. You take the cord. Your hand doesn't shake, but your heart does. Where's your daughter? You ask softly. Dead, she says. 3 years ago, trying to escape a forced marriage. But she held a knife and stabbed it into his chest. Before they choked her, you grip the cord tightly. You don't cry, but you know the fire in you just found another anchor to keep burning. That night, the villagers invite you to stay. No feast, no drums. They gather by a fire, asking, how do we teach our daughters not to bow? If children are taken like you were, how do we save them? How do we raise a child who doesn't think silence is the only way to survive? You don't have all the answers, but you tell how you escaped, how you lived, how you stood, though no one stood with you. And then, as they fall silent, you say, fire doesn't burn alone. To keep it, you must pass it. The next morning, you and your group leave, but this time, someone follows. A girl, about 13, hair braided, holding a rough wooden knife. Her mother runs after, asking, you're really going? The girl turns, if I don't, who'll teach the ones after? The mother doesn't stop her. You look at the girl, nod, get on the ship. And as the ship pulls from the bank, you glance back at the old village one last time, not for regret, but to confirm the place that was your grave now holds a small spark, and it will grow. The old village isn't the same, not because the wind changed, but because you returned, not for revenge, but to reconnect a life once severed. You leave without tears, with belief where you were torn apart will be where others begin to heal. But to heal, you must first touch the deepest wound, not with hatred, but with hands ready to lift a trembling soul. And then you find her, in an old abandoned kitchen, at the edge of the next village, where people fled a long drought. The kitchen was part of an old meeting hall, now just blackened stone walls and a sagging wooden roof, smoke-stained, the smell of mold, ash, and human. You sense it the moment you step in. The girl hides behind a kitchen nook, amid rotting wood, hair tangled like burnt grass, body smeared with dirt, clutching a rusty apple-paring knife, eyes wide, not from curiosity, but from a life knowing only fear. You don't approach right away. You kneel at the threshold, pull a piece of dry bread and clean cloth from your bag. I'm a wanderer, you say softly. No one sent me to find you, but the wind brought me here. She doesn't move, but the knife in her hand lowers slightly. You place the bread on the stone floor, then back away. If you eat it, and if you're still there, I'll return. You leave, not far, just sit by a nearby tree, pretending to mend a torn cloak. An hour later, the bread's gone. At dusk, you return. She's not in the nook, but small footprints lead to the back garden, where you find her pulling wilted leaves from an old vegetable patch. How old are you? You ask. Don't know. Is anyone looking for you? No. You nod. Don't ask more. You only say, if you want, there's a ship. And on it, no one asks you to be good. Just true. She doesn't answer. But the next day, when you reach the dock, she's there, curled on a sack of herbs, clutching the rusty knife. You don't ask her name. Don't give her a nickname. You just hand her a new wooden knife. Longer. Sturdier. This isn't for killing, you say. It's to remind you your hands aren't just for shielding your head when blows come. From then on, she follows you, silent, watching, remembering. No one knows where she came from. No one knows who beat her, hid her, left her behind. But all know, if anyone approaches her knife to test her, she'll look them in the eye as you once looked at the chieftain. You teach her to choose the right routes, to spot poisoning by eyes, not words, to stitch wounds, to keep hands steady when blood flows fast. And one evening, as you light a fire by the shore, she sits close, leaning against your hip, as if, for the first time, she's found a wall she doesn't need to break. What can I call you? She asks. You look at the fire, then say, call me anything, just not fear. She nods. Then, I'll call you the knife keeper. You don't smile. But inside, something stirs, as if a long barren part of you has just been placed in a child's hands, like a living legacy. Not everyone needs a mother. Not everyone needs a hero. But everyone needs someone who survived, to know surviving is possible. That girl, her eyes never leaving the knife, won't just survive. She'll know how to look back. The next morning, she smiles for the first time. Not a wide smile, just a small lip twitch. When you teach her to wrap medicine in linen, and she does it better than you, you place a hand on her shoulder, say nothing, but you know this is no longer the girl hiding in a kitchen. This is the one who'll follow you, not because you need following, but because the fire needs another direction to burn. And perhaps that is the true purpose of this journey, not for you to keep going forever, but for someone, one day, when you stop, to keep walking, knife in hand, heart steady. And then, when the ship has sailed far from lands heavy with ghosts, you know it's time to stop, not to end the journey, but to begin building, with what you have, rotten wood, calloused hands and memories. You choose a high coastal land, where winds aren't too fierce, water doesn't rise, and soil's soft enough for posts. No one lives there, no one claims it. It lies between villages, far enough to avoid control, close enough to welcome the lost. The girl from the old kitchen is the first to set the frame. You don't tell her, she just does it. 4 posts, 3 crossbeams, 1 tent roof, crooked, but standing after the first night's wind. In the morning, you look at her, ask, "Is this home?" She nods. "It's where my hands can work." And no one says no. You don't add more. You start gathering stones, not to throw, but to build. You build a hearth, a drying rack for herbs, a healing bench, reusing wood, once carved with hand shapes, hands that trembled in fear, now placed on the table to learn steadiness. The women who followed from other villages come too. No one says you're starting a camp. No one needs a title. They just ask, "Can I dig here? Got spare mint roots?" We found an old grinding stone. Things take shape, not from plans, but from need. A widow builds a kitchen. A young woman sets up a fish drying spot. A mother sews cloaks from spare sacks, all silent. No one fights. No one leads. They don't need to say it. Those who've survived know how to share. You build a tent for yourself, no bigger than the others, but at its center is a table. On it, you place the first wooden knife, no longer used, just to remember. From one sharp cut into a tree years ago, it all began. One day, the girl asks, "Why build again?" You answer, "Because we can't keep running. There must be a place where those who flee don't need to flee anymore." She nods, points to the ground. "Can we train hands here?" You smile. You can train anywhere, as long as no one stops you. And so, the training yard is born. No one shouts commands. Just people holding staffs, dodging blows, falling without crying. Children start coming, then old men, even some who once laughed at women learning knives, now watching from afar, not daring to enter, but not turning away. You don't chase anyone, don't force anyone. You only teach those who ask, "Can I learn?" Each day, a new door opens. No walls, but everyone entering knows this place is different, where the past isn't erased, but placed where it belongs, like rotten wood for frames, scars for guidance. You start writing again, not books, but symbols, a system of carvings on stone, hand, eye, knife, fire, water, each a lesson, a teaching, a survival song without music. One afternoon, you carve the final line on a house post. This is where no one must whisper to defend themselves. The girl looks, not fully understanding, but you know one day, she will. You've run, hidden, fought, burned. Now you plant, you mend, you light lamps. Not because you've softened, but because you're strong enough to let yourself soften. The fire in your heart no longer blazes, but it smolders like coals in a hearth, not dazzling, but enough to warm those left out in the night wind. You no longer wander, but those who found you, they go for you. They carry lessons, symbols, stories. They speak of you, not as legend, but as real. She lived, and she's here. She's building again. And then one day, you look around, see women no longer avoiding each other's eyes, children laughing loud, a man asking to learn sewing, an old woman reading lessons from a carved stone. You sigh, not tired, but light, because you know no one rebuilds what was burned, unless they believe it deserves to live on. You don't build an empire, no cult. You just rebuild, with rotten wood, and memories, and from those seemingly weakest things, you've created a place no wind can topple, because it doesn't stand on walls, it stands on people, who fell, and rose again. And among those people, there's a child, smaller than the girl who hid in the kitchen, gaunt, silent, never asking, never answering. She arrives on a windy morning, when leaves scatter across the dirt floor, and everyone's busy patching tent roofs. No one notices her until a stone mortar, polished clean, appears neatly placed before the kitchen tent, with a tidy bundle of sorted herbs beside the water trough. You're the first to see her, not because she wants to be seen, but because she stands in the right spot, where morning light slips through leaf gaps, standing straight, looking straight, silent. "What's your name?" you ask. She's quiet, but instead of running like other shy children, she steps forward and points to the blowing wind. You understand immediately. "You can't speak?" you ask, softer this time. She shakes her head, but not sadly, not ashamed, as if not speaking was never an issue, unless others made it one. From that day she stays. She doesn't learn to write, because no one taught her letters, but she learns to read, not books, but the wind. You discover this on the third day, when she comes to you, points to a branch, then traces a line in the air. Soon after, rain comes. No one predicted it, except her. Gradually, she points to footprints, knows who passed by, points to the fire, knows which wood burns fast, points to roots, knows which are poison. No one taught her, but she observes, deeply, silently, like water seeping into stone. You start teaching her with signs, not to speak, but to remember. A nod means understand. A tap on the chest means trust. A hand pressed to the ground means danger. She learns so fast it stuns even your old apprentice. This girl, she whispers, doesn't learn like we know. She learns like the wind taught her. You don't deny it. And then, one day, she comes to you, pulls your hand, and shows you a stone. On it, she's carved, with her own fingernails, 3 swirling lines intertwined. You look, don't understand at first, until she points east, then west, then to her own heart. You're stunned. 3 directions, you say. Wind going, wind returning, wind staying. She nods, and you understand. This child who's never read a letter knows how to read life, knows some things can't be spoken, only felt, and remembered through skin, breath, standing still in the wind until you know what it wants. From then on, you give her a special task. Observe, not just nature, but people. You tell her, if you see someone about to fall, but too afraid to let go, stand near them. Don't speak, just stand close, like wind near a crumbling wall. And she does, silent, steadfast, solid as stone, light as breath. People in the camp start asking, who is she? Is she the child of someone killed? Why doesn't she speak? You don't answer. You only say, some children don't need to answer. They are the question, and their existence makes us question ourselves. You once believed fire was what you'd leave behind, but this child makes you rethink. Perhaps it's wind. Wind can't be held. Wind comes when needed. Wind carries seeds from one place to another, then moves on. And one day, she's gone. No sound, no footprints.
Meinen.
Only a stone left behind, this time carved with care. 3 swirling lines intertwined. At the center, a tiny dot, like a storm's eye, or a human heart. You don't grieve. Don't panic. You just pick up the stone, place it on the table beside the first wooden knife, and say to your apprentice, she's gone. Do we look for her? She asks. You shake your head. No one searches for wind. We just remember it passed through, and then you continue your work. But from then on, you don't see wind the same way. You start carving new symbols on stones along the shore, symbols not for remembering fire, but for tracing the wind's path, because you know some children don't learn to write, but they leave pages no one can tear. And when a child vanishes like wind, what you don't expect is a storm follows. That storm takes a familiar shape, a familiar voice, and the smell of rusted iron you thought buried deep in memory. The man who once choked you with rope, forced you to kneel in snow, drew a knife from his belt like he was stroking hair. Now he's back, not alone, leading an army. Rumors arrive before he does. A boatman docks at night, face pale, whispering, an army's coming from the north. No banners, but the leader has a long scar on his left face. He's asking about your camp. You sit by the fire, listening, saying nothing. You turn to your apprentice. Get me the first wooden knife. She's shocked. You don't use that knife anymore. I'm not using it to fight, you say. I'm using it to remember who I was when he thought I was nothing. 3 days later, the army arrives. No drums, no horns, just the thunder of boots on earth. They stop a few hundred paces from the camp, setting up their own. No attack, no threats, just waiting. And the next morning, he comes, alone, on a black horse, in black armor, with a half smile, like he never thought he'd be forgotten. You stand at the camp's gate. He doesn't recognize you at first, but when he sees the wooden knife in your hand, his eyes narrow. You, he blurts. No longer the one you sold, you reply. He laughs loudly. You built a camp, taught some weak women to hold sticks, but you think you can stand against an army. You don't answer. You just glance behind him, where every woman in the camp, from elders to children, steps forward, unarmed, unarmored, but they stand in a line, eyes unbowed. A widow steps up. What did you come to take? He glances. We'll restore order. Women will return to their place. Rebels will be purged. And whoever burned a chieftain's house will pay. You speak, softly. I didn't burn for want. I burned because it was the only way left to survive. He snarls. You think I fear words? No, you reply. I think you fear what words make women dare to look you in the eye. Silence spreads like smoldering fire. You step forward. So do it. Burn the camp. Take us. But before you give the order, look around. Who among your men was sold, beaten, silenced, and who among them is starting to remember it? He turns, looks at his camp. A few soldiers' eyes dodge his. A young one grips his spear tighter. An old one steps back half a pace. Don't listen to her, he shouts. She's a witch, a rebel, a woman stirring women against husbands. You say nothing, but your apprentice steps forward. I was married to a man like you. I'm not afraid anymore. Then the widow. I begged men to save me from rape. They turned away. She didn't. Then a girl, no older than 13, stands tall. I learned to read the wind. The wind told me not to fear. A soldier behind him steps out, removes her helmet. A scarred woman, voice trembling. I was forced to spy for you, but she never asked my name, only gave me bread. He roars. Silence, all of you. I make the law. You look at him, not with hatred, but with the gaze only a survivor has still. Like stone, like earth. No, you say. You're just a man who thought he could rewrite law with a whip. We rewrote it with scars. He draws his sword, but his hand shakes. You raise the wooden knife. Strike. But no, if you kill me, it's not the fire that'll die. It's you proving you fear most, what you can't control. For a long moment, no one moves. Then, as if he can't bear it, he turns his horse. We're leaving, he tells his men. Not worth wasting swords on mad women. You don't gloat. But you know, victory doesn't come from blood. It comes from the man who trampled you. Now unable to meet your eyes, he leaves, head not bowed, but not raised either. And when the road's dust settles, you turn back. No cheering. You only say, keep going. We still have wood to split. Because you know, true victory is when no one fears a knock in the night. But you also know something else. Victory doesn't last if it relies only on courage. When he left, it doesn't mean he won't return. The strongest enemy isn't the one with a sword, but the one who learns to come back with a just cause and an army twice as large. And you, with no fortress, no iron gates, no moat, must think one step ahead. You begin quietly building something no one in the camp names. A trap, not to kill, but to expose. Because you understand for the powerful what topples them isn't a blade, but truth dragged into light when they think they hold all power. The trap isn't in the ground, but in people's hearts. You start by giving the old soldiers, those who followed him but stayed behind, a place in the camp. They dig, chop wood, dry fish, no one asking whose side they were on. But you know, and you don't drive them out. You let them live, work, hear stories by the fire each night, and bit by bit, they start telling how he manipulated, threatened, twisted laws, bought loyalty, then discarded it when useless. Those words, you don't write on paper, you carve them into stone, into tent posts, into kitchen walls. No one reads the full truth, but all feel this is where what's hidden will be revealed. Then you teach the children again. If someone says one thing but does another, what do you do? And the children answer. We ask again, 3 times, in 3 voices. You nod. One says, If he says I protect, but holds a whip, what's the first voice? Surprise, another replies. The second voice, doubt. The third voice, repeat his words, for all to hear. You smile. That's enough to set the trap. No arrows needed, just words repeated at the right time.
Eat.
You do the same with strangers visiting the camp. Don't ask who they are, but what they think is right. And if their words contradict their actions, you don't confront. You just have a child ask again, in the third voice. So when a man comes saying, I'm here to protect women, but eyes a girl's chest, when he thinks no one sees, the smallest girl stands and asks, if you protect, why look like you're choosing prey? The man's speechless. No one touches a knife, but by morning, he's gone, leaving his armor on the step. That's your trap. No teeth, no saws, just a mirror. A vast mirror, made of collective memory and spoken courage. You don't declare war on anyone. You just build a place where anyone entering with lies hears their own words twisted back through a child's mouth. And then, as you predicted, he returns, this time not with an army, but with sermons. He comes on a clear morning, bringing a priest, papers, promises to restore harmony. He stands in the camp's center, proclaiming, I come not with power, but an invitation. Who wants to return to the old laws will be spared. And then, a girl weaving baskets nearby looks up and asks, do you spare yourself for killing your wife? The camp goes silent. He freezes like stone. Another woman stands. You sent men to burn my tent. Now you invite me back to my old home. Then an old soldier speaks. I followed you once, but I've slept without nightmares since coming here. I'm not going back. He shouts, this is rebellion. An old woman shrugs. No, this is memory. You step forward then, unarmed, just empty hands, and one sentence, thank you for coming. But the trap closed long ago, and you didn't know you were standing in it. He leaves, again, this time no shouting, no rage, but fear, not because you're strong, but because everyone he thought he could command learned to ask questions. And you know from now on, no guards are needed. The vast trap is working, and it doesn't catch people, it catches words, and makes them betray their speaker. After that day, no one in the camp calls you by old names anymore. They don't mention she was sold, don't say the blacksmith's widow, don't whisper the one who burned the chieftain's house. No one needs to call you that, because all those things dissolved into another name, one no one assigned, no one bestowed, but formed quietly from how you live. The firekeeper. No one declares you the firekeeper. No one builds statues. No one carves your name in stone. But when a new child comes to the camp, asking who started this place, they don't tell long tales. They point to the hearth, the tree, the wooden knife on the table, the carved symbols on stone, the ruts in the earth, where blood once flowed, and say, the firekeeper passed through here. It's not a title, it's how they name you, like an element, like wind, water, earth, something that exists without introduction. And you, in silence, understand, this is the first time in your life. The name you carry doesn't rest on who owned you, beat you, lost you, or feared you. It's your name. One morning, as you teach children to snap roots without breaking the core, your old apprentice asks, do you want to be buried here? If you look up, smile. I don't need a burial place. I need a place where, if another child is cast out, they'll pass through and realize, someone like them was here. The firekeeper. No, you reply. You. The one who knew how cold it is without fire, and chose to let no one feel that cold again. You don't age like the old do.
Hi.
No one sees you slow. You still walk each morning, patch tent roofs, teach which herbs are poison, light oil lamps when the wind shifts suddenly. But one day, before the sun rises, you don't wake. You lie on your cot, eyes closed, hands still on the old wooden knife, as if last night you finished telling a story, then fell asleep mid-sentence. No one wails, no one panics, they just enter your tent, one by one, placing something beside you, a carved stone, a cloth scrap, used to mend a cloak, an unburned stick, an old binding rope. Then they cover you, not with earth, but with words they never dared speak. She looked at me when I couldn't look at myself in a mirror. She told me not to bow, even when my head was bleeding. She didn't ask where I came from, only where I wanted to go next. And finally, the girl who hid in the kitchen, now leading new students, steps in, kneels, places a small stone on your chest. On it, a new symbol, two spirals crossing, a spark at the center. She whispers, "No one keeps fire forever." But fire doesn't die, it finds new keepers. When night falls, the camp's hearth burns brighter than ever, not because of more wood, but because everyone wants to share the fire you lit. No one calls you a widow anymore. No one tells how you were sold. They only say, "There was a firekeeper, and if you're cold, go toward that light." But that light, strangely, doesn't just burn in the hearth, doesn't just flare the night you closed your eyes for the last time. It spreads with every step leaving the camp, every hand you held, every eye that saw you stand in the cold without trembling. Because though you never bore a child, never called anyone daughter, never gave milk or cradle to sleep, you birthed a generation, not from your womb, but from patience, not with blood, but with memory and action. The children who came to the camp, with trembling hands, nameless nightmares, unhealed scars, are grown now. Some set out to start camps of their own, in deeper forests or by the sea. Some stay, passing lessons in new languages, symbols, songs, footsteps in games. Some go to old villages, teaching children with wooden knives and questions no one taught how to ask. And the most wondrous thing, they don't speak your name as one gone. They speak of you as a principle, as if you're not a person, but a verb. She kept, they say. She connected. She burned when needed, but built when enough. They don't carve your statue, but in every new camp that rises, there's always a first stone laid, not for a foundation, but a marker. On it, a spiral, a fire mark, a tiny spark at the center, a symbol no one needs to explain. And so, children who never met you grow up among stories of you, not fairy tales, but survival guides. If someone says you're not worth living, remember she was told that, but lived. If forced to bow, remember she stood in an enemy camp and said, "You can't control my memory." If abandoned, remember she walked alone to the last riverbank. And if anyone asks, who was she? The answer is never a name, but the one who birthed us, not with blood, but with choice. A generation grows like that, knowing to question, to stand, to know no one is born to be another's property. And you, though lying still under a light layer of earth, live in every gesture, every decision, every time a child dares say no. No one writes your history, but you're woven into cloth, tapped into boat edges, tied into leather necklaces. No one calls you mother, but all understand. Without you, they wouldn't know how to be human. You never carried anyone in your womb, but you carried many in memory. Never nursed anyone, but you gave them reason not to die cold in silence. And so, though you have no bloodline, no clan, no one bearing your name, a generation calls each other by the look you gave them, a look without possession, without pity, simply acknowledging they deserve to live. And so you birthed them. No one is born to be alone, but sometimes, one cast aside, becomes the root of a forest no one expected. You are that root, and the forest has begun to grow. But trees don't tell who sowed them. They just reach up, rustle, cast shade, like how people speak of you, not as a warrior, not as a hero in a wolf fur cap or wielding a great shield, but as an early season wind, a first spark, a whisper in the ear of an abandoned child. They don't build statues of you with an axe. They don't carve you riding through the night. They don't need to, because you didn't leave feats. You left reasons to keep living. In a world where women were forced to silence, traded, taught to endure as a sacred duty, you didn't shout. You didn't lead with speeches. You didn't kill to prove strength. You existed, and that existence, enduring, stubborn, unyielding, became the most terrifying thing to those who thought you'd vanish after a beating, a slap, or being sold like goods. Now, from the farthest fishing village to towns deep in the forest, people pass stories of a woman with no clan, no husband, no noble blood, but with a grass tent, a wooden knife, and a hearth fire that never dies. When children ask, was she a warrior? They shake their heads. No, she was a legend, not for how many she killed, but for how many she made choose not to live as victims. A legend, because though you're gone, someone still feels you beside them when they tremble, stepping up to an oppressor for the first time. A legend, because though you had no children, every child learning to say no carries a piece of you in their heart. A legend, because when a fire burns in a distant village, people say, someone must have learned from her. And so your name is no longer a syllable. It's an affirmation. If she did it, I can too. Those who didn't believe you'd survive the first winter now whisper your name like a god's, but you're no god. You were hungry, beaten, begged for help, failed, thought you'd die nameless, and that's why you became the greatest thing, living proof that surviving isn't shame, it's the highest rebellion. The girl who hid in the kitchen years ago, now grey-haired, still leads children around the old camp, now a pilgrimage site, pointing to each stone, each stick, each faint mark in the earth, saying, here she sat, there she laughed. The children's eyes widen, as if expecting you to rise from the mist. But you don't. You're gone. And because you're gone, you're everywhere. Anyone can carry you, in a woven branch, a charcoal-drawn symbol, a story told on a windless afternoon. And so, you live on. No one remembers your birth. No one marks your death. But all remember the moment they first heard of you. Because in that moment, they saw themselves, not perfect, not heroic, not extraordinary, but resilient, alive, ready to stand. No one calls you a warrior. The word's too small. They call you a legend. Because you didn't need victory to be immortal. You only needed to stand, once, in the cold, bare-handed, unguarded, and keep the fire, and let others see it's possible. And from that moment on, the world was never the same. The story of the firekeeper in Viking times is not just a tale of brutal survival amid ice and violence, but a profound metaphor for the lives of women today, especially in modern American society, where personal freedom and the right to speak are foundational, yet not always a reality for all. In the story, a nameless woman was sold, beaten, forced silent. She didn't start with strength, but with wounds. And from those wounds, she built a camp, not a fortress, but a refuge, a place to pass on the belief that women can learn to protect themselves, define their own worth. In the context of America, where women still grapple with gender inequality, domestic violence, racial bias, and societal expectations, this story underscores a clear lesson. You don't need political power or wealth to create change. You need the courage to break silence. Like the story's protagonist, women in America today may not be warriors in others' eyes, but they are firekeepers for their communities, their children, those waiting for a spark to rise. When you stand after trauma, when you teach others with lived experience, when you turn pain into legacy, you don't just survive, you change a generation. And in today's turbulent society, that is the new definition of a legend. If the story of the firekeeper touches something in your heart, don't forget to subscribe to keep lighting more fires together. Thank you for joining, and see you in the next survival journeys, where memory never fades and will never kneels.